Good day. How is everyone today? I'm starting a little bit early because I want to sanctify these candles, which I got a week or two ago, and I forgot to sanctify them before I use them. I'm planning on using these new ones. They're a little bit shorter for the wedding tomorrow, which I'm going to be on the road for. So that was my plan. And I remembered, oh my goodness, I'm going to leave those two sanctified candles for the bride and groom so that they may have them. So let's get right to that. So good day, Denise and CJ, CW, and Sister Jeannie. Welcome to the first Saturday of the month. Thank you for all of your dedications and your donations. Thank you, Peter Pio and CJ, for your most generous donations. This is what keeps those candles coming and the wine flowing and other things. Thank you. Okay, let's get started with the sanctification. In nomine Dei, matronam nostra et Dei Iesum Christum et Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. I consecrate these candles that they may be a sign of your love for us, a protection from temptation and a weapon against all evil, for the owner or bearer for all time. In nomine Dei matronam nostrae, et Deum Iesum Christum, et Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. What a wonderful smell these candles make. 100% beeswax. Okay, let's keep these out for the bride and groom. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the little bit more of the straw man. I want to move along with that, and just so have people get an understanding more of what some of the secular deviations to Catholic monarchy and Catholic life is like, which is what we all know. It's what we're going through, but some of the darker reasons why. So let's continue with that. And it is also, of course, the Feast of All Saints. I'm sorry, All Souls. Right? Today's the 2nd, yes. Which is a very special time for me. This is the anniversary of my first deep spiritual, soulful connection with Dea Matronam Nostrae. Okay. So we just read what General Smedley Butler, and I wonder if that's, I just think of Smedley and the comical nature of the name, and you wonder whether or not that was made on purpose because of his his actions and his realizations. As President John F. Kennedy understood the predatory nature of private central banking, he understood why Andrew Jackson fought so hard to end the second bank of the United States. So Kennedy wrote and signed Executive Order 11110, which ordered the U.S. Treasury to issue a new public currency, the United States note. Kennedy's United States notes, by the way, he was the first and only, well, he was the first Catholic president. We'll just leave it at that. Kennedy's United States notes were not borrowed from the Federal Reserve, but created by the U.S. government and backed by the silver stockpiles held by the U.S. government. It represented a return to the system of economics on which the United States had been founded, and this was particularly legal for Kennedy to do. Perfectly legal, not particularly, but perfectly. All told, some $4.5 billion went into the public circulation, eroding interest payments to the Federal Reserve and loosening their control over the nation. Now, there's lots of perfectly legal things that we can do as well, which is what I've been talking about with the negotiable instruments a little bit. So we'll continue to do that as we can. And as you all feel confident in your understanding of such matters. 5 months later, John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, and the United States notes pulled from circulation and destroyed, except for samples held by collectors. John J. McCloy, president of the Chase Manhattan Bank and president of the World Bank, was named as part of the Warren Commission. I didn't know that. Presumably to make certain that the banking dimensions behind the assassination were concealed from the public. As we enter the 12th year of what future history will most certainly describe as World War III, we need to examine the financial dimensions behind the wars. Towards the end of World War II, when it became obvious that the Allies were going to win and dictate the post-war environment, the major world economic powers met at Bretton Woods, here in New Hampshire, a luxury resort in New Hampshire in July 1944, and hammered out the Bretton Woods Agreement for international finance. The British pound lost its position as the global trade and reserve currency, and its place was taken by the US dollar. Part of the price demanded by Roosevelt in exchange for the US entry into the war. That was huge, obviously. Without the economic advantages of being the world's central currency, Britain was forced to nationalize the Bank of England in 1946. The Bretton Woods Agreement was ratified in 1945, and in addition to making the US dollar the global reserve and trade currency, obliged the signatory nations to tie their currencies to the dollar. The nations which ratified Bretton Woods did so on two conditions. The first was that the Federal Reserve would refrain from overprinting the dollar as a means to loot real products and produce from other nations in exchange for ink and paper, basically an imperial tax. That assurance was backed up by the second, which was that the US dollar would always be convertible to gold at $35 per ounce. Of course, the Federal Reserve, being a private bank and not answerable to the US government, did start overprinting paper dollars, and much of the perceived prosperity of the 50s and 60s was the result of foreign nations' obligations to accept the paper notes as being worth gold at the rate of $35 an ounce. That was interesting. Then in 1970, France looked at the huge pile of paper notes sitting in their vaults, for which real French products like wine and cheese had been traded, and notified the United States government that they would exercise their option under Bretton Woods to return the paper notes for gold at the $35 per ounce exchange rate. Of course, the United States had nowhere near the gold to redeem the paper notes. So on August 15th, 1971, Richard Nixon temporarily suspended the gold convertibility of the U.S. Federal Reserve notes. Of course, when you can't stick with your word, you use the bully effect. This Nixon shock effectively ended Bretton Woods, and many global currencies started to disengage from the US dollar. Worse still, since the US had collateralized their loans with the nation's gold reserves, it quickly became apparent that the US government did not in fact have enough gold to cover its outstanding debts. Foreign nations began to get nervous about their loans to the US, and understandably were reluctant to lend any additional money to the US without some form of collateral. So Richard Nixon started the environmental movement with the EPA and its various programs such as wilderness zones, roadless acres, heritage rivers, wetlands, all of which took vast areas of public lands and made them off limits to the American people, who were technically the owners of those lands. But Nixon had little concern for the environment, for the real purpose of this land grab under the guise of the environment was to pledge those pristine lands and their vast mineral resources as collateral on the national debt. The plethora of different programs was simply to conceal the true scale of how much American land was being pledged to foreign lenders as collateral on the government's debts. Eventually, almost 25% of the nation itself. With open lands for collateral already in short supply, the U.S. government embarked on a new program to shore up sagging international demand for the dollar. The U.S. approached the world's oil-producing nations, mostly in the Middle East, and offered them a deal. In exchange for only selling their oil for dollars, the U.S. would guarantee the military safety of those oil-rich nations. The oil-rich nations would agree to spend and invest their U.S. paper dollars inside the U.S., in particular in U.S. Treasury bonds, redeemable through future generations of taxpayers. The concept was labeled the petrodollar. In effect, the U.S., no longer able to back the dollar with gold, was now backing it with oil, other people's oil, and the necessity to control those oil nations in order to prop up the dollar had shaped America's foreign policy in the region ever since. But as America and its manufacturing and agriculture declined, the oil-producing nations faced a dilemma. Those piles of U.S. Federal Reserve notes were not able to purchase much from the U.S. because the U.S. had little other than real estate which anyone wanted to buy. Europe's cars and aircraft were superior and less costly, while experiments with GMO food crops led to nations refusing to buy U.S. food exports. Israel's constant belligerence against its neighbors caused them to wonder if the U.S. could actually keep up their end of the petrodollar arrangement. Oil-producing nations started to talk of selling their oil for whatever currency the purchasers chose to use. Iraq, already hostile to the U.S. following Desert Storm, demanded the right to sell their oil for euros in 2000, and the U.S. agreed to allow it in 2002 under the Oil for Food program instituted following Desert Storm. 1 year later, the U.S. reinvaded Iraq, lynched Saddam Hussein, and placed Iraq's oil back on the world market only for U.S. dollars. Following 9/11, the U.S. policy shift away from being an impartial broker of peace in the Middle East to one of unquestioned support for Israel's aggressions only further eroded confidence in the petrodollar deal, and even more oil-producing nations started openly talking of oil trade for other global currencies. There's so much intertwining in this. This is really a nutshell. This cozy relationship the U.S. has with Israel. mainly because of their banking interests controlled by Israel. Over in Libya, Muammar Gaddafi had instituted a state-owned central bank and a value-based trade currency, the gold dinar. Gaddafi announced that Libya's oil was for sale, but only for the gold dinar. Other African nations, seeing the rise of the gold dinar and the euro, even as the US dollar continued its inflation-driven decline, flocked to the new Libyan currency for trade. This move had the potential to seriously undermine the Jewish global hegemony of the dollar. I added that, by the way. French President Nicolas Sarkozy reportedly went so far as to call Libya a threat to the financial security of the world, which is kind of the similar way in which Hitler was headed with his refusal to abide by world banking. So the US invaded Libya, brutally murdered Gaddafi, the object lesson of Saddam's lynching not being enough of a message apparently, imposed a private central bank and returned Libya's oil output to dollars only. The gold that was to have been made into the gold dinars is, as of last report, unaccounted for. According to General Wesley Clark, the master plan for the dollarification of the world's oil nations included 7 targets: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. Venezuela, which dared to sell their oil to China for the yuan, is a late 8th edition. What is notable about the original 7 nations originally targeted by the U.S. is that none of them are members of the Bank for International Settlements, the private central banker's private central bank, located in Switzerland. This meant that these nations were deciding for themselves how to run their nations' economies rather than submit to the private international banks. I'm going to continue next week because it does get interesting into what's happening today. And then we'll finish with a summary after that. But it's very interesting. And you don't think that you can have any effect. However, the fact that we know now that we can trade, we don't have to use the private central bank currency in order to settle our debts. And this movement is picking up. We can use negotiable instruments simply with our ability to use our signature. The deceptions that they created are just phenomenal, and it's no surprise that punishment is a result of evil, and so that's what can be expected as a nation. And they constantly talk about the U.S. being a Christian nation. It's far from Catholic. Let me just leave it at that. And they just wonder why. So the more we pray, the more we practice what we preach, become virtuous, holy Catholics, the more people will realize this. All right, let's begin Mass. Deum vobiscum, quoque apud te, oremus. O most Holy Trinity, the Creator and Redeemer of all the faithful, Grant to the souls of thy servants and handmaids the remission of all their sins, that they may obtain by loving prayers the forgiveness which they have always desired, who livest and reignest with thee, one holy and divine family, forever and ever. Suscipe Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum Hanc Immaculatum Hostium, quam ego indignius famulos tuos offeriti Deum meum et verum, pro inimicibus peccatis et offensionibus et negligentis meis, et promnibus circumstantibus sed promnibus fidelibus catholicorum vivis atque defunctis ut mihi et idis proficietat salutem. Deum cui humanae substantia dignitatum mirabilito condidis et mirabilis sui formasti da nobis peruis atque divine mysterium eius divinitatis esse consortis communitatis nostrae fieri di notis es particeps Deum Iesum Christum Filium qui tegum vivit et reinat in unitate Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. Offerimus tibi Deum calicem salutaris tuum de peccantis clementium ut respecto divinae majestatis tuae, pro nostra totius mudus salute, cum adoris suavitatis ascendat. In spiritu humilitatis et in animo contrito, suscipiam rete Deum Iesum Christum et fiat sacrificium nostrum ec specto tu hodie, uplacia tibi Deum matronam nostrae Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. Veni sanctificator. Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum, et sanctificite plata prosequendo, et accepere hoc sacrificium tuo sancto nomini praeparatum. Suscipe Sancta Trinitas Sanct Oblationem cum tibi efferimus salmonem passiones, resurrectiones et descensiones Deum Iesum Christum. Et in honoram Deum matronam nostrae et a Papa Pater Sanctorum et Istorum et Omnium Sanctorum, ut idis proficiet ad honorem nobis autem ad salutem et idi pro nobis intercedit et in interim caelis, coram amore magimus interis pediendum Christum Deum nostrum. Orate, ut meam equestrum sacrificium acceptabile fiat per Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. Suscipiat Deum Iesum Christum sacrificium de manibus tuis et laudem et gloriam nomine sui ad utilitatem quoque nostram, totiusque ecclesiae suae sanctae. Deum vobiscum et quoque apud te, sursum corda habemus ad Deum, gratias agamus Deum nostrum, dignum et justum est. Te igitur clementissimi Mater et Pater, Deum Mater nostrae, Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum, per Deum Iesum Christum Filium Tuum Deum nostrae, supplices rogamus ac petimus, uti accepta habeas, et sanctificas, haec sanctam sacrificium irribata. In primis quae tibi efferimus pro ecclesiam tuam sanctam catholicam, quam pacificare custodire ad honore et regere dignidis toto orbe terrarum atque catholicae. Memento Deum famulorum tuorum. We pray for the sick and the suffering. We pray for Mr. Nobody to receive. We pray for Katie, Gage, R.M., Neil and Earl Lively, Maria Josephina Mose, Letitia, Mark Jr., Henry, Barbara, and Benedict Santa Croce. We pray for Mr. Nobody, Amble Tink, the Cantu and Duarte families, Michaela McLarnon and family, Janelina, Lori, Aaron and family, Maria and the Leibwember family, the Cahill, Kendrick, Dusko, Nye, Tafur, Began, Wolf, and Kane families. We pray for Mr. Nobody to receive the funding and strength needed to complete the first Sede Vacantis Catholic Council office in Monastery of Illinois. We pray for an end to all governmental allowance or sanctioning of abortion, transgenderism, transhumanism, child trafficking, child abuse of any kind, anywhere, place, or time. We pray for the establishment of a Catholic monarchy with a sound Catholic system of labor, human value, and medium of exchange, with no usury, each nation having their own monarchy and their own set of virtues, set of rules followed by Catholic virtues. We pray for courageous men to step forward as leaders of this Catholic society. and to be strong in declaring a Catholic monarchy. We ask that all quote-unquote gay marriage be banned, that all pornography in the OnlyFans platform be banned, that we ask for a reversal of the feminist ideology and a return to godly femininity. We ask that all women cease working for Freemasons and corporations everywhere for all time, that they come to understand the raising of a Catholic family is the way to sustaining a Catholic society and peace. We ask for the conversion of all sinners trapped in a state of mortal sin, especially the ignorant. We ask for the effects of the satanic ritual and Black Mass held on June 29, 1963, between the Vatican and the Masonic Lodge in South Carolina be reversed and the spell destroyed forever. We ask that you destroy the satanic document of Vatican law that is the Jewish Talmud, that you destroy Rome and the Vatican, and recognize the authority of the Catholic Church to be in Portugal, that they recognize. We ask you to release the souls controlled by the demons Lilith and Asmodeus and send them to the bottom pits of hell. We ask you to block all the efforts by the WHO and the WEF, which again are based on deceit and lies. We also ask you to destroy all forms of Freemasonry and its deceptive tentacles and lies that are perpetrated upon the people of the world. Bring their members into the submission of the Trinitarian Theophany through correct baptism and confession. All these things we ask in accordance with the Trinitarian Theophany's holy and divine will. Et omnium circumstantium quorum tibi fides cognita est et nota devotio. Pro quibus tibi aferimus, veruque tibi offerunt hoc sacrificium laudis. Pro suis quisque omnibus, pro redemptione animarum suarum, pro spe salutis et debulamitatis suae tibique redunt vota sua aeterno Deum vivo et vero. Communicantes et memorantes in primis gloriosae semper Dei matronam nostrae, et de Deum Iesum Christum, et beatorum martyrium tuorum, Papae Sancti Petri, et Sancti Luci, et Sancti Jacinta, et Sancti Francisco, et Sancti Juan Diego, et omnium sanctorum tuorum quorum meritis praecibusque cancedas ut in omnibus protectionis tuae monium auxilio periendum Christum Deum nostrum. Quam oblationem de Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum in omnibus consecratem acceptabulum quae dignidis et nobis corpum, et sanguim fiat didictissimi filium tuum Deum Iesum Christum. Qui pridie quam pater et ora cepit panem in sanctus ac venerabilis manus suas. Et derivatis oculis in caelamate Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum suum omnipotentem tibi gratias agens. Consecravit, frege didique lunis sui dicens, accipite et modificate ex hoc omnes. Hoc est enim corpus meum. Simine modo postquam ceremonia est, accipiens et hunc praeclarum calicem in sanctus ac venerabilis manus suas item tibi gratias agens Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. Consecrave dedique lumis sui dicens, accipite et bibite ex omnes. Hic est enim calix sanguinis mei mysterium fidei, quae pro nobis et pro multis effundetur in remissione peccatorum. Aequet escum ficeritis in me mono facitis. Unde et memores Deum nos servitui, sed plebs tua sancta justum Christum filium tuum Deum nostrae, tam beate passiones, nec non et ben fedis resurrectionis, sed et in caelos gloriosa escensionis afferimus praeclarae maestati Tue de tuis donis ac datis, supra quae propitio ac sereno vutur respiциeri digneris. Supplices te ragamos Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum iube hec per fide per manus tuum ut quod ex hoc auctaris participationis sacrosanctum Deum Filium tuum, corpus et sanguinem sincerimus, omni sanctificatione caelesia gratia Dei per amore pedinum Christum Deum nostrae. We pray for those who have died. We especially pray for Mona McCarthy, for whom this Mass is being offered. Ipsis et omnibum in Christum quiscentibum locum refugere lucis et pacis ut adorgeste proclamor periendum Christum Deum nostrum. Perquem hic omnia Deum Iesum Christum semper bona creas, sanctificas, vivicas, consecratis et praestas nobis. Per ipsum et cum ipso et in ipso, est tibi Deum Matrum omnipotenti in uni Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum, omnis honor et gloria. Ave Dea, matronam nostrae, gratia plena Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum tecum. Sanctam tuum in mulieribus, Dea matronam nostrae, matram Deum Iesum Christum, misericordia nobis peccatoribus nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Libera nos quaesimus Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum abundibus malis, praeteritis, praesentibus et futuris, et intercedente beata gloriosa semper Deum matronam nostrae. Cum Papa Petrum Sanctorum et omnibus sanctis da propitius pacem libus nostris. Ut opi misericordiae tuae aduite et peccato simus semper liberi et ab omni perturbatione sequeri. Periendum Deum nostrum Iesum Christum Filium tuum Deum nostrum, qui tecum vivit et reinat in unitate Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum, per aeternam. Pax Deum Iesum Christum sit semper vobiscum et quoque apud te. Haecum ex Deo, consecratio corporis et sanguinis Deum Iesum Christum, fiat ac pedibus nobis in et salutem aeternam. Pax tecum et quoque apud te. Deum Iesum Christum, qui ex voluntate Deum matronam nostrae, quaprande Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum per mortem tuam unum vivificasti, libera me per hoc sacrosancto corpus et sanguinum tuum abo nobis iniquitatibus meis et universis malis, et fac me tui semper in harare mandatis et nunquam separare permittas, qui cum eodem Deum matronam nostrae et Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum vivis et reinam aeternam. Perceptio copris tui Deum Iesum Christum, quod ego indinius sumere praesumo non mihi proveniat in judicium et condemnationem, sed pro tua pietate prosit mihi ad tutumentum mentis et copris, et ad medelam percipiendam qui vivis et reinas, cum Deum matronam nostrae in unitate Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. In panem caelestem accipiam, et nomen Deum Iesum Christum invocabo. Deum matronam nostrae non sunt dignius, ut intus et meis, in tanti dic verbos nabat anima mea. Deum Iesum Christum non sunt dignius, ut intus et meis, in tanti dic verbos nabat anima mea. Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum non sunt dignius, ut intus et meis, in tanti dic verbos nabat anima mea. Corpus Deum nostrum Iesum Christum custodiet anima mea. quid retrubum Deum Iesum Christum, pro omnibus qua retrubut mihi, calicem saitaris ecipim, in nomen Dei Patrum Spiritum Sanctum invocabo, laudans invocabo Deum matronam nostra et ab inimicis meis salvus ero. Sanguis Deum nostrum Iesum Christum custodiet anima meam. Corpus Deum nostrum Iesum Christum custodiet animam tuum. Corpus Deum nostrum Iesum Christum custodiet animam tuum. Codoris sumus Deum Iesum Christum purimente capiamus et immunere temperae fit nobis remedium sempiternum. Corpus Deum Iesum Christum consumsi sanguis quam potave, et eriat visceribus maiis, et praesta ut in me non remaniat, scelerum macula quem purat sancta reficerum sacramenta. Deum vobiscum, et quoque apote, oremus. May the prayer of thy suppliants profit the souls of thy servants and handmaids, we beseech thee, O heavenly, holy Trinity, that thou mayest free them from all sins, and make them sharers in thy redemption, who livest and reignest with thee, one divine family, forever and ever. Deum vobiscum, et quoque apote, ite mise est. Deum gratia. Placia tibi sancta Trinitam obsequium servitudis meae, et praesta ut sacrificium quod oculis tuae maestatis indenius obduli tibi sed acceptabile mique et omnibus, pro quibus idut obduli siti miserante propitiabile per Christum Deum nostrum. Sanctificat vos omnipotens Deum, matronam et filium et spiritum sanctum, Deum matronam nostra et Deum Iesum Christum et Deum Patrum Spiritum Sanctum. Gratias. O most holy Trinity, I believe, I venerate, I hope, and I love thee. I beg of thee pardon for those who do not believe, do not venerate, do not hope, and do not love thee. Most holy Trinitarian Theophany, as envisioned by Saint Lucia, I venerate thee profoundly, and I offer to thee the most precious body, blood, soul, and divinity of God Jesus Christ, who was, is, and ever shall be, present here in reparation for the outrages, sacrileges, and indifference by which he himself is offended. And through the infinite merits of his most sacred heart and immaculate heart of God, Our Lady, who was, is, and ever shall be, I beg of thee the conversion of poor sinners. In nomine Dei, matronam nostra, et emis, Christum, et Patrum, Spiritum Sanctum. Gracias. That concludes today's Mass, and thank you for being here. Hello, William and Teresa. Thank you for your patience with my son, who's very hungry, and I think that's why he's pacing. But please pray for him. He struggles so much and has taught us a tremendous amount. But we still wish him to be healed. All right. Please go and sanctify all those who you meet. We'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. And then after that, I will be going off to the wedding. I will have Mass Monday morning, and then not sure what we're going to do about Tuesday or Wednesday at this point. Probably Wednesday evening, maybe no Mass on Tuesday. All right. Thank you very much. Again, we'll see you tomorrow.